We have finally made it, folks. It is Super Bowl week. Whew, it's been a long season. You know what? We got to this point, though. I said it before and I'll say it again. Kudos to the NFL for getting this far. But anyway, guys, this is episode number 61 of YWC Football Talk. I already teased it on Twitter that Joe Provost will be joining me. Not fellow, but Michigan native. Kind of close, though. Ontario and Michigan right next to each other. But no, noted Michigan Wolverine fan, noted Detroit Lion fan. We're going to be talking college ball. We're going to be talking NFL, maybe a little bit of prospects. We'll obviously dive into the Super Bowl. But before I start all that, there was a surprise that I teased. And what is that surprise, you ask? This afternoon, I got an email from iHeartRadio notifying me that YWC Football Talk has been approved for iHeartRadio. So iHeartRadio is now one of the new homes of YWC Football Talk, just another streaming site where you can find the podcast on. Well, anyway, guys, when I come back, Joe will be with me, so sit back, relax, and get ready for a fun-filled podcast with Joe and I. All right, folks, welcome back to YWC Football Talk. Here with me today, I already hyped him before. He's back once again. The Michigan man, the card man himself, Joe Provost. Joe, welcome back to the program, my friend.
Great to be back. Thanks for having me once again.
No problem. Anytime. There's a plethora of things we can talk about, but the first thing I got to talk about, man, there was a tweet that came out today from EA Sports saying that NCAA football is coming back to a video game format, something I think that football fans have been clamoring for a while, and I know you yourself, as such a big NCAA football fan, must be loving this right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, the first thing that ran through my head when I saw that tweet from EA Sports was, it just took me back to memories of, like, lining up at either, like, Walmart or Target or GameStop, and that was, like, an automatic, like, midnight release. Like, I'd be there, I would buy a bunch of energy drinks and stay up until 4 in the morning, rocking the Dynasty mode or just playing online. Just so much fun. I can't wait for that to be back.
Like, I may have to buy a PlayStation 5 because of it. Like, I have a PlayStation 4 right now, but they said for next gen only, so I'm like, oh, if it's PS5 only, I'm going to have to drop like another $500 on top of what the game costs.
Exactly. Well, at least they shouldn't be like $1,000 by the time that game comes out. I didn't see yet if it's going to be this fall or if it's going to be a 2022 release.
Well, regardless, it's just giving something for football fans to look forward to. Like, you know what? It's something that they've been wanting for a while. And it also shows, too, that, like, hey, obviously there's that black cloud of the NCAA not paying players, but the fact, too, that they're doing stuff like this is really kind of putting that more into the spotlight, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, I know when this whole thing kind of came about where they stopped the franchise of NCAA football, it was about, the whole, like, players being compensated for their likeness. It was pretty undeniable that they were using. I mean, for those who aren't familiar, like, when you first got the game, it would just have, like, it would have the players' numbers. They'd be in the correct position. And they would even kind of make a little bit of an effort to kind of make it look like the players themselves, but they weren't legally allowed to put the names. And then that's when, like, roster share became a thing, and people could, like, customize rosters, and, like, they could hook you up within seconds with, like, the legit official rosters for each and every team. So yeah, there's a couple of quirks that I've read about where I'm hoping that they'd still make roster share a thing, because I love having, like, the legit names of the players.
Yeah, exactly. Even to, like, you don't have to give the players a boatload of money, but just something for their likeliness. Like, it's not, I brought this up on multiple podcasts already, but I just love the whole Tennessee scandal with giving players money in McDonald's bags just filled with cash. Like, I just find that funny. Like, I saw a TikTok, actually, of a guy from Florida saying, yeah, the guy was committed to here 2 days later. He's like, I'm going to Tennessee. Now he knows that he got a brown bag full of $100 bills. So
yeah, definitely. And, I mean, that's what they give, kind of the SEC, if you've seen the memes before, whenever it's like SEC in a meme, it's usually like the money logo, because they're kind of known to do that. So
I mean, Disney's paying a boatload to get that rights in 2024. My only thing with the game is if it's not Fowler and Herb Street calling the action, it's a dud for me.
Yeah, I mean, with the anticipation of this game, you would think that they would just go all out and they want it to survive. I know that they had even, they had cited kind of declining sales as a reason also why it went. A lot of people kind of called BS on that and said, it's a whole, like, player likeness type thing. But yeah, I don't see. I mean, if you're reviving a franchise, I think you got to come out with a bang and just do it up the best you can, make it realistic and authentic.
Exactly. You know what? Give the people what they want. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I'm. Whenever that day comes, you will catch me at midnight at whatever is the nearest video game retailer. I will be there.
Hopefully not socially distanced, and by that I don't mean that we're not following the rules. I'm just saying hopefully by the time the game comes out, the pandemic's a thing of the past. That's all.
Exactly. Yeah, one can hope.
Yeah, that's all we can do at this point is hope. And like I said before, we were hoping 6 months ago that we'd get a full NFL season, and here we are. We're uninterrupted. Like obviously, college football had its hurdles, and the NFL did too. But the fact that both were able to crown champions,
yep,
it says a lot. Like that's just something I wanted to bring up quickly. But before we get into everything else with this Sunday, I gotta ask you, man, how are we feeling in Detroit right now? We got a trade that happened. We got a new head coach in there. He's a pure football guy. What's the mood like right now within the Lions fan base?
Yeah, I mean, the Lions have just been down for so long. I would say the people that are kind of that buy into the rah-rah, a coach, if a coach ever won a presser, I guess, I guess, a lot of people were on board, and then a lot of people were kind of like, that's all cool and everything, but at the end of the day, like, he needs to bring wins. I do think people are buying in that this new regime is going full-blown culture change, and we'll kind of dive into that a little bit once we talk the big blockbuster trade that went down. But if we're just talking about Coach Campbell right now, I was kind of surprised. I thought they would go with some experience. But it's definitely kind of a culture move. And, I think coming off of Patricia, where it was kind of, he tried to install the Patriot way. And, I don't blame him for that. He's been a part of success. He just tried to implement that here. And sometimes that just doesn't always, it's just, if it was that easy, a lot of Belichick assistants would still be employed.
Exactly, because a lot of them, too, go off and they try to be Bill. Meanwhile, you look at a guy like Brian Flores. Flores is making it work because he's being himself, and you could say the same with Vrabel to an extent. Obviously, I only say that because Vrabel was never a coach under Belichick, or at least I don't think so, where he went somewhere, he brought Belichick mannerisms, but he was still himself. He didn't completely become a dictator like what Patricia did. I think Patricia thought, you know what, I'm going to go in there, be this hard-ass, win over the locker room, and that didn't work. Meanwhile, Dan Campbell, I'm getting the sense that, you know what, he's giving me that guy where he's like, your buddy and everything. Like at work, I have my work. My manager's a great guy, but when it's time to buckle down and shit hits the fan, it's go time. Like they know, like it gets serious, and that's what the vibe I get from Dan Campbell.
Yeah, definitely, and I think a lot of people are excited just for a change, just because I think people had just grown so tired of Patricia. And I don't have any kind of hard feelings toward him. It didn't work out. I hope he's obviously he's back in New England now. I hope he's kind of learned from this experience. And yeah, I mean, I don't have any ill will toward him. I know a lot of his former players unfortunately do, especially the ones in Detroit. But yeah, I guess we'll see what happens. This is definitely all you're going to hear me say it a lot tonight. It's about changing the culture.
Well, no, you're 100% right. Like that's something Detroit needs because like we saw how Barry Sanders was handled. Obviously, it was before a year in my time. I think he was like probably 5 when I retired. I'm trying to think of the year. I'm pretty sure it was the late 90s though.
Yeah, it would have been. Yeah, definitely late 90s.
Yeah, so sure. I was like 5 or 6 at that time. Like I was in kindergarten when he retired, and then you obviously had Calvin Johnson, where the situations with them just grew ugly, and they grew tired of it, and then they left on bad terms, and even there was a situation with them wanting Johnson to owe them money back. Mm-hmm. Now let's just jump right into the trade, where you know what, they did the right thing with Matt Stafford. He's in LA now. We'll get into Goff in a little bit, but with the Stafford side of things. The one storyline people aren't noticing is, besides him going to the Rams, is he's reunited with his high school best friend, Clayton Kershaw. For those of you who don't know, Stafford and Kershaw are best friends. Or not best friends, but I'm pretty sure they went to high school together, and the two husbands and wives are close. The other thing I was going to say, too, with Stafford is it's going to be interesting to see how he fits in LA, but at the same time, too, if McVay wanted him, you know what? I salute McVay for the trade and being so aggressive on it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is one of those trades, and I say this without, when it comes to the Lions, there's zero bias. It's just been ingrained like how bad they are and the poor decisions that they make. I have almost as much fun trashing them as I do kind of like giving them props. Um, so with regards to this trade, honestly, I did not think that they would get anywhere near the package that they got. I was thrilled with the amount of draft picks, even though they are futures. And I think, something that's kind of being overlooked a little bit, we got a new regime in, they're getting settled into their new roles. There's a lot of inexperience within that war room come draft time. So I think that it's not necessarily the worst thing that they're future picks. I know a lot of people kind of said, well, the Rams are going to be talented, no doubt about it. I expect they'll definitely compete for their division, if not the entire NFC. And I think on paper right now, they've got to be, kind of NFC frontrunners going into the 2021 season. But I don't think anybody really expected that return for Stafford. And we're definitely pumped about the picks that they got. Goff, we'll see what happens. If he does anything, I think most people kind of tend to agree that that's icing on the cake. I know the Lions, brass, of course, came out and said, we're riding with him. I wouldn't expect anything less. I mean, it's not like you're going to acquire, a quarterback and just say, well, hey, we don't plan on. He's not part of the long-term plans. You're not just going to come out and like bluntly say it like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. Like that. We'll get into the Jared Goff thing in a minute because I have some thoughts on that. But I feel like with Stafford now, obviously, I have them as NFC frontrunners. But at the same time, too, I'm not going in here like people were saying with Tampa last year, where it was, we'll also get it down a little bit, but the whole Super Bowl or bust.
Yep.
Like with LA, people are going to be labeling them as that. Like I saw Dan Orlovsky. Oh, I know Dan Orlovsky obviously has a connection. He's friends with Stafford. He was a part of the Lions. Was saying that like they're NFC frontrunners, which I only think they are just because of how much quarterback uncertainty there is in that conference. Their division has some of the most exciting talent in it now, with Stafford being added in LA, because you have him, you have Russell Wilson, you have Kyler Murray, and we're going to see what happens with San Fran. I personally think Jimmy is on his way out. But this is a trade that it's going to be exciting. It's good for Stafford, too, because you know what, people can really see now how talented he is, because everyone thinks, oh, he's in Detroit, he was in Detroit, he was bad, da-da-da-da. But in reality, and I labeled him as this, he's one of the most underrated quarterbacks, not just of right now, but in the history of the NFL.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I am going to be his biggest fan. With LA, I wish him nothing but success. And he deserves every bit of it, especially everything that he endured in his time in Detroit. I know that, and again, this is kind of like the culture change a little bit. The Lions, there was a rumor that they were offered the 8th overall from Carolina and turned that down so that Stafford could go to a more favorable situation. And now, Detroit's not exactly a destination city for free agents, but I think what they're trying to do there is say, hey, you put in for the franchise, we're going to remember that, and we're going to take care of you on the back end, and not, kind of make some of the same mistakes like they did with Calvin Johnson, Barry Sanders, and even people kind of forget about Ndamukong Suh. I mean, they had opportunities to trade him. They really wanted to re-sign him, and eventually they didn't come to a deal, and he walked. And that's definitely not what you want, and I really think they're just trying to turn a new leaf, sending him to LA. They're immediate contenders. I get why the Rams were aggressive. If you ask me, though, I thought they were a little bit too aggressive. But, sometimes you overpay for a quarterback, and I get that.
Exactly. And the other thing I look at it, too, with LA was part of me thinks that they just treat draft picks as a situation, where you're like, oh, hey, you got to get this done. It's like, no, I'll worry about that later. And then later comes and you kind of have like that deer in the headlights look where because I'll say this now, if they don't win a Super Bowl within the next 5 years, or if they're not even win one, but they're knocking on the door, NFC championship games every other year or something like that, I'm going to look at this as the Rams lost the trade, because sure, they got the weapons, but my only concern with Stafford is he doesn't have that playoff success. It's like, obviously he's been in the playoffs before, but he's 0 for 3 in the playoffs. No offense, but the one thing I look at with the Rams is they're looking at this as, hey, we can win now. He's going to be a fun quarterback. It's just, my only thing is, though, people are probably going to be putting too much pressure on him to where, like we saw with Tom this year, if he has a bad game, everyone's going to go, oh, was it really worth it? He's not that good, yada, yada, yada. So I'm proceeding this with caution. I'm not out here saying, oh, yeah, Stafford for MVP and all this stuff. But you know what? I'm taking him going to LA with like that sigh of caution. And also, too, the fact that there's so many new coaching changes. That's one thing that's really going unnoticed with the Rams, is how many coaching staff members they lost this year. Most notably, Brandon Staley is now the head coach of the LA Chargers.
Yeah, definitely. And, another thing that, I think, Detroit fans see it as much as, this guy has been put through the ringer. And, he's had injury after injury, and he's definitely like a gamer. He's a tough guy. He's not, the last thing he wants to do is miss a game. And there's probably been a few games in the past couple of years where he should have just took a seat. So you're getting a leader. You're getting a locker room guy, a guy that's going to rally the troops. But my biggest concern with him going forward, he's 32, but is he 32 going on 36 because of all that he's been through?
Exactly. Like, you look at what happened with Drew Brees in the playoff game against against Tampa Bay, with New Orleans, where, he looked good, but then he hit that wall. That's why I have one concern with him, because even, too, remember last year, 2019, he was like what Russell Wilson was this year. Like, everyone had him as MVP by like week 5 or 6, and then he got hurt, and then we didn't see him again. Like, there was obviously Chase Daniel was still on the Bears. Who was it? David Blau is the name I remember. That was the backup that played.
Yeah, and it's just that is the main concern. And his body has, like I said, it's been put through it. There's a lot of miles on it. But at the end of the day, I wish him nothing but success. Unless he comes across Tom Brady,
That's something you and I both can agree upon. Now with the Jared Goff part of the trade, part of me thinks that the Rams gave up so much so they didn't have to eat any cap. But I kind of look at this as, Jared Goff has potential to succeed because there's no pressure on him to win. Like, everyone says, obviously, oh, he's so bad, this or that. But if he can go to Detroit this year and manage, because like my ceiling for them is probably 4, 5 wins, best case scenario. Like, no offense, I feel like this year's going to be a growing pains year, kind of like what we saw in Carolina. But we saw Carolina pull a few out, so if Jared Goff can do that and turn some heads, everyone's just going to say, hey, you know what, maybe he's just better when he's not under pressure.
Yeah, the thing about Goff, always, if you look at his game to game, is consistency. He looked like an elite top 5 quarterback against the Buccaneers earlier this year when they beat the Bucs, who of course are in the Super Bowl. And he outdueled Tom Brady in that game. Granted, the Rams have a really good defense. But hey, the Bucs do too. So yeah, with Goff, it's just been a matter of like inconsistency. You never know which Jared Goff you're going to get week in and week out. I don't expect him to perform better because he had the offense overall, top to bottom, was, in my opinion, is far superior in LA. But you look at, like, I was looking at a couple different metrics, like QBR, passer rating, and low key, like, he and Stafford are pretty comparable. I don't know if you've checked it out at all.
I haven't looked at his QBR from this year at all, but I know that a lot of people also say it too that McVay's offense was figured out after that Super Bowl against the Patriots, because after that we saw in 2019 they kind of took a step back, and then everyone started saying, like, did Belichick crack the code? Because every few years, always these offenses come along. Like, we saw it with San Francisco, and then they got figured out. We're seeing it with Baltimore right now, where, look, hey, you can slow Lamar down. And then we saw it with LA too, where, look, if you make Jared Goff panic and throw the ball away, chances are he's either going to have it incomplete or throw an interception. So if they can kind of get his quarterback mechanics under wraps, which I think they can, it'll help him. But also, one other thing I want to note with that is I low-key love the hire of Anthony Lynn as OC. I think that's, it's a good position for him to go to and kind of rebuild his stock to potentially become a head coach in the NFL, because he's one of those guys where he had a good run with the Chargers. Obviously, there was just some stuff where it didn't go his way and he got fired, but he's one of those guys that I think eventually in a few years will be knocking on that. He'll be a part of that head coaching carousel again. I was going to say knocking on the door, but I changed up my wording.
Yeah, no, you kind of stole that point right out of my mouth because I mean he's gotten a lot of credit for his handling of Herbert, and I know the beat writers of the Chargers and all that, just said that he did an incredible job with him, and if he can kind of fine tune Goff at all, hey, it's a win. But at the end of the day, I know a lot of people were kind of trashing the Lions having to take on Goff, but if you look at it, his contract's only the largest portion of his guaranteed money comes in the next 2 years, which the Lions would have been on the hook with Stafford anyways. Yeah. So it's kind of a wash to me, and if anything comes out of it, hey, it's gravy at that point.
Like if Jared Goff's in that middle average, like that out of the best quarterbacks in the league, like that 12 to 18 spot, I think it's a win for the Lions. Like I don't think Dan Campbell's gonna be going and saying, "Hey, we need you to throw 50 touchdowns and 10 picks on the year." No, if he has a year where he's say 30ish something and even if he can keep his interceptions under, let's say 16, I'll call it a win for Detroit.
Definitely, and I mean that's the thing. He has a super low floor, but there's a ton of potential there. And I'm not expecting him to come out and, be a top 5 or top 10 quarterback. But like you said, if he can be kind of in that 12 to 15 range, kind of a guy that if you don't have a backup quarterback in fantasy, if you like the matchup, you kind of turn to him. And I know a lot of people said, he's going from LA to the NFC North. Well, if you look at it, obviously the Lions play their games indoors. The Vikings play their games indoors. Where the trouble's going to come is at Chicago, at Green Bay.
Well, just hope, count your lucky stars and hope to God those games occur before Thanksgiving, I guess.
Exactly. And one funny point that I saw kind of get brought up, I do think Aaron Rodgers is coming back to Green Bay, but if Aaron Rodgers departed Green Bay, who's the best quarterback in the NFC North?
Honestly, if you look at everything right now, say if Mitch stays with Chicago, Cousins and Goff, it's honestly who's the most mediocre out of the bunch?
I mean, exactly. I'm not a Kirk Cousins fan whatsoever. I think his contract is literally insane. I think that offense could perform much better. But yeah, I mean, we don't know what you would have in a potential Jordan Love, and Trubisky I don't know. I think he needs a new change of scenery and a new coaching staff. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation.
It is, and we can talk a little NFC North if we will, because the one thing I always say about the Minnesota Vikings, and I actually heard a noted Vikings fan, Mike Florio, say this, it's kind of like they took a redshirt year where, Cousins got his extension, I think Zimmer and Spielman were extended, and obviously they got Dalvin Cook's deal done, Thielen's under contract, so they're like, you know what, if we have a bad year, who cares, last 3 minutes of the divisional round, part of me thinks that, hey, you know what, the Vikings can bounce back, but at the same time, too, they have questions on the defense, and their offensive line is brutal. They do not have a good offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, that's the exact thing, right? I mean, you can have all the weapons in the world if you don't have a line that can protect and a defense that can get off the field, it doesn't matter. And I think that's a lot of what the Vikings went through this year. Fortunately for them, I think they have a bright future. They have a nucleus of weapons. They just kind of got to build the trenches now.
Exactly, because we saw it with the Houston Texans, and even too, I can ask you about where you think Deshaun Watson will end up in a bit, but we always saw with him, hey, he had all these great weapons. This is obviously before the Hopkins trade, but the offensive line was always bad. He was the 4th most sacked quarterback in 2019, and besides their front 7, their secondary couldn't get off the field, so offensive line and secondary are always those 2 positions, which in Minnesota have been struggling points throughout the years, and even though they do have Harrison Smith, but if Minnesota can fix those 2 positions up and, maybe add another edge rusher, they have potential. They have a lot of potential. I'm not saying Super Bowl potential, but you know what? They can make some noise because I honestly think that the Justin Jefferson Diggs deal, we're calling it that, is one of the rare win-win deals in the NFL.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, at the end of the day, if the Rams if they ever win the NFC, I'm not even saying they have to win the Super Bowl. If they get to a Super Bowl, I think you could be looking at another rare win-win trade where the Lions, hey, they moved on, they turned a new leaf, they acquired some draft assets, and, Stafford got to get to a Super Bowl. That would make it a win-win, in my opinion, as well.
Exactly. And the other thing you said, too, is you don't think Aaron Rodgers is leaving. I don't either. I took it as, and I think you've had this before too, but you know when you're pissed off, you're in emotion, and then you say something, and then you kind of look back to yourself, and you're like, wait, why did I say that? Like, fuck, like, I sounded like such an idiot there. Like, I'm not saying Rodgers is going to do that, but I feel like him saying that was, you know what, we lost the game. I don't know what's going on, because the NFL is the one league, it takes a lot of flack for this, for the whole non-guaranteed contract thing. I personally love it, but in a league where, you know what, anything can happen, like, that's just the reality of the NFL. Rodgers says, hey, you know what, they drafted someone, they may want to move on from me, but the second he wins that MVP trophy, Gutekunst would be an idiot to get rid of him.
Definitely, and I mean, that's, but at the same time, and I agree, they should absolutely keep him at just about all costs. I can understand the frustration, because imagine with how close that Bucs game was. Imagine if they could have used one of those, used the pick that they used on Jordan Love on a potential impact player, or at least a player that saw the field.
Yeah, like
that championship.
Oh, sorry to cut you off there, but yeah, like if they went out, not even saying you had to go get Justin Jefferson or like Henry Ruggs or a CeeDee Lamb, you could have gone out and gone in a later round pick like Brandon Ayuk. You could have gotten Michael Pittman Jr. even, which I think very underrated rookie season from him. Chase Claypool even. T. Higgins. You could have gotten someone like that, but then again, like, we live in a world where, you know what, you can't go back in time. You can't go back to April 2020, which I don't think anyone wants to go back to April 2020, and say, yeah, you know what, like, don't draft him. Draft a receiver instead. Or in the second round, don't draft A.J. Dillon. Go draft Chase Claypool. Like, it's that unfortunate game of what if that we always play in sports. Like, I say it all the time with certain plays, no matter the game, or it's like, oh, hey, what if we kept this player or this happened? Like, it's just the unfortunate reality of everything. But if Green Bay can learn from their lessons, you know what? Either go out and get someone in free agency to help him, or draft. You're only going to make him want to stay more. And one other thing, too, is you know how there was that rumor that McVay called about Rodgers?
Yep.
Apparently, Green Bay denied that. And if Green Bay had said, yeah, they got calls about him, you're just giving Rodgers more power to not only go where he wants, but you may not get as big of a haul because people are going to learn that he's available, and you're just going to have people knocking on your door to get him.
Exactly. And part of me, I just kind of think back and how this situation, how it's kind of unfolding. It reminds me so much, and it's so ironic, of when the Packers drafted Aaron Rodgers, and Favre was, clearly upset, thinking that, hey, we still have a run here. Like, I'm going to be here for a little while still. Like, why are we doing this right now when we're legitimate contenders?
Exactly. It's just the whole handling of everything. But because also, the one thing with Green Bay as well was they didn't fire him, but they're not renewing the contract. I think that's the polite way of saying firing Mike Pettin. And then the two guys who are actually in a conversation to get the job, one of them you know pretty well is Jim Leonard of the Wisconsin defensive coordinator.
Yep.
I think that would be a pretty good hire because Wisconsin's a team this year. I didn't see too much of them, obviously, because the Big Ten was really shot down, and then there was all that stuff too. I think Kevin Warren did a bad job of mishandling everything, especially with Ohio State. But would you see that hire working for the Packers if they did go the college route for a coordinator?
Yeah, and I say that because I just feel like the game translates so much more than it used to. You see quarterbacks that come in and they're just so much more ready, and I think the same goes for coaches as well. I mean, you've seen guys come in from the college ranks and have success, whether it be a head coach or an assistant. So I think that's a good fit. And I personally, as a Michigan fan, would not mind him leaving Wisconsin because he is good at his job.
Exactly. And I just want to translate to the college real quickly, actually, because you haven't been on in a bit. But since you were there, since this happened with the Jim Harbaugh extension, I want you just to answer this for me. Yep. I have a feeling this is a sink or swim kind of extension where, you know what, either you succeed and then you stay with the team further, or you sink and you know what, you're gone. I also think, too, with just the recruiting process of it, that's why I think they were more pressured to keep him.
Yeah, definitely. They had a lot of big fish pretty much on the hook, and in order to get them in the boat, per se, they needed to keep Harbaugh. Otherwise, all hell was going to break loose with regards to their recruiting. They've got some absolute should-be studs coming in, a lot of five-star guys, and one of them being a quarterback, which in college, unfortunately, I mean, you've got to have a complete team, but a quarterback can make a world of difference, and that's kind of been the biggest disappointment so far in Harbaugh's tenure is that, he was kind of billed as this QB whisperer and QB guru, and Michigan just kind of hasn't really had like a stud quarterback. I mean, they got a few transfers, Shea Patterson being the most notable. He was all right, but not didn't live up to the hype. I agree with you, and they've really, I think what the staff has realized is you can recruit in the top 10, and they're usually, about anywhere from 5 to 10 on a down year in recruiting. They're, a little bit outside the top 10. But what there's a direct correlation to recruiting and success in college football, and they went full blown. There's a lot of inexperience on that coaching staff, but they are guys that are going to grind the recruiting trail. They're all like in their 30s. A new defensive coordinator that they hired from Baltimore. Obviously, I'm sure John gave them a great reference. So that's going to be super interesting to see how that all unfolds. But long story short, I do agree with you. I think it's almost sink or swim time, but I think he kind of built in a little bit of a crutch by going with a younger staff, kind of saying, hey, these guys were inexperienced, but look at the recruits we're bringing in. We're building for 2 years from now. If they absolutely implode, I think things get real messy in Ann Arbor real quick, though.
Yeah, I feel like there's no pressure to go win the Big Ten this year, especially because I'm not too familiar. I know the teams and stuff, but Ohio State's a question mark, obviously, just because they did lose Fields and stuff. But I also think Chris Olave should have gone to the NFL. But that's just me, and I understand Rucker coming back because I feel like with this tight end class, it's very rich, and I feel like he would have gone maybe third or fourth round. I think he could potentially move up into late first, early second round with him staying and potentially balling for Ohio State. Is there any other teams in the Big Ten you see really, kind of thriving this year?
Yeah, Wisconsin's always solid. They're just always solid. That Graham Mertz, their quarterback, he came out and put on an absolute show in week 1 against Illinois, and he just looked every bit of the 5-star that he was built up to be. Outside of that, Northwestern, they're a funny team because the Northwestern football is at their best when they're not expected to be good. The second that they have any expectations is when they always disappoint.
I mean,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, sorry to cut you off. I was just going to say that one of the best strength and conditioning coaches in college football, only second to probably Oregon.
Yep, definitely. And I mean, Pat Fitzgerald is a master motivator. He's obviously coaching his at where he played. So they're always, even in their down years, they give a lot of teams really tough games. So yeah, Ohio State's just at that point where it doesn't matter who comes, who goes. They just reload. And they have a kid by the name of C.J. Stroud, was a top dual threat quarterback in his class. So they're just kind of at that point where, they haven't been able to get over the hump since Urban won that national title with good old Cardale Jones. But they're just, until somebody knocks them off, you can't bet against them as far as the Big Ten goes.
Just to rotate to another sport quickly, I feel like they're kind of like the St. Louis Cardinals, if you will, because obviously if you guys don't know, Nolan Arenado is now a St. Louis Cardinal, one of the best third basemen in the league. I feel like it's kind of like that with Ohio State, where St. Louis every year just finds a way to get into the playoffs, and also same thing too, they find a way to get into the college football playoff. They find just players to go in there and hey, we're going to plug you in and we're going to win. That's just one thing I wanted to say. That's just a comparison I felt like with the two.
Yeah, that's a real good comparison. Because the Cardinals have had a long, sustained run of success and have a couple rings in that time too. That's an A1 comparison.
Shout out lazy booking. But no, that's just one thing I was want to ask quickly, because the Big Ten's always a conference that interests me. And also I believe I heard Michael Wilbon say that Pat Fitzgerald has a 10-year extension he signed this year with Northwestern too. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, they definitely wanted to lock him up. He was getting interest from a lot of schools, and I know Northwestern has among definitely the hardest. It's probably the hardest school to get into. So they're really limited in their recruiting, but they're all really smart dudes who are grinders on the football field, and you mix that with a guy that has a good scheme and is a master motivator. Yeah, you can go out and knock off some teams like they have.
Exactly. Also, I feel like a lot of the more you look at it too, there's a lot of famous just writers and stuff and TV hosts who work at ESPN who went to Northwestern, because I know they have a great journalism program. The only other rumor I heard with Fitzgerald, or not rumor, but a hot take that I have, I still feel like that if Matt Nagy ends up getting fired from the Bears, they're gonna be knocking on his door.
Yeah, that's another transition that I could easily see happening. I think it always makes sense. I think it's hard to pry a guy away from his alma mater, but at the same time, it's hard to say no to coaching at the highest level.
Like, I mean, I always feel like if Saban retires eventually, I feel like the Crimson Tide are going to be knocking on Dabo's door to come and kind of say, like, hey, come here, you went to school here, you were a star receiver here back in the 80s, I believe.
Yep.
So
I could definitely see that happening as well.
It's just one of always those things, like, where you just, like, what, it's nothing's ruled out until it's ruled out. But through all this talk, there's a football game on Sunday. I feel like it's a big game. It's being played in Tampa. The super something.
Yeah, the
Super Ball. No, it's not the Orange Bowl. That's in Miami. The Outback Bowl was a month ago. Oh, right, the Super Bowl. Yeah, we have the Super Bowl on Sunday with Patrick Mahomes going up against Tom Brady. And a year ago at this time, we saw Brady in a red suit, because the Super Bowl was actually a year ago today, where they were doing the NFL 100 thing. And he was just said, I don't want to be here in a suit next year. And look, he'll probably be one when he enters the stadium, but he's going to be putting his pads on come Sunday. So for anyone still hating or denying on him, it's time to stop.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's like I used to see a lot more Brady hate come across my timeline back in the day. I think he's really silenced it. He is the undisputed GOAT of football as it stands. We'll see, what kind of career Mahomes carves out, but as it stands right now, Tom Brady is the measuring stick.
He is, and I like everyone too already who's going like, oh, Mahomes is going to have a better career after Tom's done. The only thing I want to say about this game is that, remember Russell Wilson back in 2014? They were about to go back-to-back, but then obviously everyone knows by now they threw it on the 1-yard line. There was the infamous Malcolm Butler interception, and another dynasty was reborn. Meanwhile, with Seattle, they have failed to get back. I'm not saying Kansas City's going to be like that. I'm just saying, I think if Kansas City really wants to start getting that dynasty talk, you gotta win Sunday. Because if the Bucs win, it's no, I don't think anyone's gonna be saying, "Oh, dynasty," because part of me feels like Tom's gonna retire after next season, just because I think he wants to beat New England in New England. That's just me, though.
Yeah, kind of as the playoffs went along, and you could see this Bucs team really starting to gel both offensively and especially defensively. I thought, hey, if they somehow managed to run the table, I honestly thought, if you would have asked me a couple of weeks ago, I would have said, okay, he rides out on top and, calls it good. He's got, 7 rings. Nobody's ever done that. And
no team.
What more do you have to prove? And, now lately it comes out and he says, hey, I'm ready to play through 45. And it's wow. He is, I don't think he's close to being done.
I don't think so either. Part of me just feels like next year when his contract's done, I don't know if Tampa's just going to want to, obviously they're going to want to keep him going and stuff, but it's going to be interesting because Tampa does have some key free agents they got to lock up this offseason. But no, I feel like, for as long as they're going to be willing to go, they're going to be willing to go. Part of me always said too, because the way I looked at the exit was, kind of like a ex-girlfriend thing where at first, like, you kind of, not wish bad on them, but you're like, oh, like, really? Like, you weren't ready to see it, but then eventually, after the Green Bay game, I was like, you know what? He'll always be my quarterback. Like, I know he's not on the Patriots anymore, but he's the reason why I fell in love with this game. A 7-year-old kid, it happened to be the Tuck Rule game, but me watching that game just fell in love with the game of football, and, like, he became my guy, and the Patriots became my team. And for everyone asking, yes, I'm still a Pats fan. And as for Sunday, I am not supporting the Bucks. I'm supporting Tom.
Yeah, and that's kind of, people ask me, where did my kind of Tom Brady fandom come from? Obviously, it came from Michigan. And then the Lions have just always been awful my entire life. So I've always found myself rooting for a Michigan alum within the NFL. And Tom was just kind of the ultimate, like, I remember that exact run, the Tuck Rule and all the snow and Vinatieri's field goal and the hit Woodson on Brady. And, it's just, it's crazy. But, I've been a fan ever since. I'm sure there's thousands of bandwagoners that claim that, but I can tell you it's 100% legit and authentic. I was never like a Patriot fan. I was a Tom fan, kind of just how you're describing. You're not a Bucks fan, you're a Tom fan.
Yeah, exactly. Like, people ask me, like, oh, are you going to get your Bucks jersey? I was just like, no. If I buy any more merch that's Tom Brady related, I'm going to go on his TB12 store and support him directly.
That's where a lot of my Christmas gifts came from.
I have the shirt that was I got the book he did. Like, it was like a cookbook and like a wellness book a few years ago for Christmas. And then I bought the Tom Brady. It has his initials in it, and then it has a 6. And on the back, It does all the Roman numerals from all the Super Bowls. But I just wanted to change something quickly because here I got a text that I see on my watch from a friend that said Schefter apparently went on a podcast and said that the value for Darnold is a late first-round pick.
Wow. So right away, that kind of screams like, I have no problem admitting, as things evolve, situations evolve. But I remember back in the day, and it's kind of funny. I always used to think, like, why do these GMs, like, covet these picks? Like they're... like a first rounder used to be like untouchable. Like, you were not getting anybody's first rounder, much like sometimes even second rounder. So I think they're kind of adapting and kind of seeing, like, I don't want to compare it to the NBA because that's like two apples and oranges, but you see a lot of wheeling and dealing, and I think that's kind of coming to fruition in the NFL a little bit more, where teams are saying, hey, if we believe in it, we're going to go get it. And that's, we saw that with the Rams. And if somebody believes in Darnold, it just feels like, hey, it's a change of scenery type deal. We'll coach him up. We'll fine tune some things, and he could potentially be our guy. That's things evolve over time. It blows my mind that you just said that, but hey, things change.
I've said this before when it comes to, like, actually, I remember I was talking to a friend of mine, and actually he's a former guest on here, Andy McNamara. He's a Browns fan, and I remember talking to him right before the wildcard game, and he's like, I don't know, I feel kind of nervous. And I just said, any given Sunday. That's the way I look at the league now. You know what? Any week, anything can happen. That's why I love football, because one week I experienced it with the Pats this year. 1 week, we beat LA 45-0. We go into that stadium 5 days later, and we lose 23-3. So it's like, the factor of anything can happen, I love it and I hate it.
Yeah, the NFL, and I mean, you hear it a lot on, when you're watching either the Combine or whether you're watching the network or watching the boys over at ESPN during the draft. It truly